Good morning. Most of you already know me by now, but allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Jim W., and I'm a grateful drug addict. I'm here this morning to tell you all a short version of my life, my testimony, if you will. I have felt called by God to do this for some time now, and seeing how I've recently celebrated being clean from drugs and alcohol for 20 years, it seemed like a good time. I'm not up here to get any accolades for being clean for 20 years or to tell you how well I'm doing in my life, but rather to hopefully give you some insight into how powerful the disease of addiction is, to tell you the grip that it can have on you and how it can tear families apart. But most of all, to share with you what God can do for those who seek His help. I have to believe that most everyone here today has been, is now, or has been affected by this disease, be it a parent, a spouse, a child, a close friend, or even yourself. As I stated earlier, this is a short version. My first drink was when I was 8 years old. I really didn't know what I was doing then, but I already knew I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I was very uncomfortable in my own skin. But I found with just a swig of that bottle that went up in the cabinet, that went up high that my mom didn't think I could reach, but I could, helped me change the way I feel. This was the start down a long and rocky road of lying, cheating, stealing, deception, destruction, and degradation. You get the point. It wasn't too long before I found my brother's and sister's marijuana stash. After all, this was the 70s, you know. I put a little bit of it in the pipe that was there and I smoked it, and I liked it a lot. It made me feel good. It made me get out of myself. Let me go back to before I even got high or drunk for the first time. I was taking my brother's coin collection, the silver coins out of his coin collection books, and going down to the ice cream store and buying ice cream cones with it. Clearly, there was something very wrong with my thinking very early in my life. Addiction specialists call this having a broken moral compass. The stealing started small and grew worse over time as my drug and alcohol use grew. Family members' wallets and purses were fair game, as well as my friends' mothers' purses. I wouldn't take much, because I knew that they would be noticed and they wouldn't leave them out any longer. By the time I was 14 years old, I was drinking and doing drugs a lot. I hit it well, and was still able to stay under the radar for the most part. I still excelled at soccer and some other sports and other interests. But I had tried most every drug that was available. My last 3 years of high school, I was high or drunk most every day. Cocaine was fast becoming my favorite drug. This was probably around the time that I crossed the invisible line, the line that we in the recovery world use to distinguish between recreational use and the need to use drugs, becoming a drug addict. Keeping this as short and to the point as I can, I will summarize my life from 18 till 28 years old. I would do any drug I could get my hands on. I drank most every day. I went through 18 jobs that I can recall. I destroyed most every relationship, be it friend or family, got shot, got stabbed, and overdosed more than once. I had to move frequently. I can't imagine why. I got married and she threw me out. I can't imagine why. I was homeless for a short time. I can't imagine why. Nobody understood me. Why couldn't they just all leave me alone? But seriously, all that time I kept on thinking I was having a good time. But towards the end, the emotional pain was so bad that I tried taking my life a few times. Now these weren't some vain attempts or weak cries for help, but things like putting a loaded gun to my head and pulling the trigger. Thank God it misfired. He had other plans for me. I was so clenched in the grip of my disease that I couldn't see that the root of all my problems was the drugs and alcohol. I spent all my time blaming the cops, my bosses, the friends, the family, for all my problems. Again, why couldn't they just leave me alone? After all, I wasn't hurting anyone else, or so I thought. Then on a rainy Sunday morning of July 28th of 1990, at the end of a 4-day crack binge, riding around in a beat-up motorcycle around the pouring rain, I reached out in utter desperation, in prayer. God, help me. I was heading back to the city again for the umpteenth time to get more drugs. And at some point during that ride, I really came to understand that if I did this one more time, I might not make it. And although I used to die for quite some time, this was different. Something reached out inside me and said, let's try something different. I think that was God. But I reached out and I screamed, God, help me. And you got a picture, I'm on a motorcycle with these leather goggles on my face. I had tears up above my eyeball level that I couldn't even see out of them. This wasn't some typical foxhole prayer said 1,000 times before, like, if you get me out of this one, God, I'll never do it again kind of prayer. It was a true cry for help. God came back into my life that day and guided me from Route 80 in Patterson to my mother's front door in Ridgewood. I truly have no memory how I got there. There she stood, the woman who would hang up the phone when I called, the woman who I stole thousands of dollars worth of family silver and jewelry from, the woman who wouldn't let me in her house anymore for sheer self-preservation, the woman who had resigned herself years earlier that she would be probably burying her youngest child prematurely. My mom opened the door that day and saw her drenched son standing there. All I could manage to spit out of my mouth was, I don't want to die anymore. Please help me. She took me in that rainy day. Picture it, my 5'1" mother rocking her 6', 220-pound son, who stunk to high heaven from the dumpster I'd been sleeping in for the last few days. She told me she loved me. How could she love me? I hated me. It wasn't a pretty sight. After a shower and some real food, and several hours of phone calls, I was being driven up to a hospital in Sussex County that had a detox unit. I used to think that was God's first miracle He performed for me that day. But once I started coming out of my self-imposed coma, I came to understand that God kept me alive through all my active years of addiction. There were miracles after miracles after miracles. I just couldn't see them then. Now this is where the story starts getting good. I finished a week of detox. I went to a 6-month rehab without getting high. I graduated from that rehab on a Sunday afternoon to see a room full of family and new friends to cheer me on. I was staying clean and learning how to act like a human being instead of like an animal. No easy task, but over time God kept working with me and making changes in my life.